All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how you are most likely selling your hardscape, your outdoor living, or your remodeling business into bankruptcy, and more importantly, how to fix it. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to give you the exact engine that our clients are using to create a price ceiling and price floor, which will allow you to empower your entire company to sell for you without selling you into bankruptcy and without you having to be present in every single deal. This video is going to apply to any company who does design and build work where you are setting a custom project price. And if you think that you are too big for this, think again. We had a client who's doing about $6.5 million in revenue, but only 2% net margins come to us. And after applying what we're going to show you in this video, they were able to 8x their margins in 4 months and hit 16.1% in net profit. Now, if you are a larger company, then you understand that size does not guarantee profit. Most of the time, what actually ends up happening is that guys will scale up very quickly and then realize that they're not as profitable as they once were, and they will actually end up scaling down. I mean, for you, watching this video, have you ever thought to yourself, man, it'd be way easier if I just got rid of everybody and did it myself, right? That's because you don't quite understand your numbers to the point that you can manipulate them to get the numbers or the goals or the metrics that you are trying to achieve. That is what we're going to be covering in this video. So the 4 main points that we're going to be looking at. Number 1 reason that you're losing money on every sale. The 3 scenarios of inaccurate pricing and how 2 of them are hurting you. The simple job cost analysis engine, or JCAE, that you will use to pull yourself out of the financial hole that you are in. And the bonus price ceiling and floor strategy that will help you close more jobs starting today. Everything I'm covering is going to be 100% free. You can implement today. All of our clients do it. This is like the second step that we do with all of our clients. If you don't like free videos that are helping you, go ahead and leave now. For those of you who want to have a very profitable business, stick around because we're going to be covering that right now. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get some basic definitions down. You might have your own terms. That's nice. I'm just going to be using these right here. So let's get on the same page. First things first, we have revenue. This will refer to the total cash received in a fiscal year. Now, fiscal year refers to January 1st to December 31st, 9 out of 10 times. The next item we're going to look at are the expenses. All expenses can be broken down into 2 main groups. You're going to have your job cost or your direct cost, and then you're going to have your overhead or indirect costs. Now, job costs refer to material, labor, equipment rental, everything directly tied to fulfilling a specific job. Your overhead costs are going to refer to things like rent, utilities, admin personnel, insurance, marketing. These are the essential costs of keeping the business running. Whether you have 1 job, 10 jobs, 100 jobs, 1,000 jobs, does not matter. Now, your net income can be a profit or a loss, but net income is going to refer to revenue minus all of your expenses. Okay, that is your final result. We are not going to be looking at if you entered the year with a cash in the bank or with no cash in the bank at a loss. Okay, we're just looking at within 1 year. Okay, now the goal is going to be to generate as high or as healthy a gross margin, which is the profit made on a specific job, on every single job. Why? Because the gross margin is going to be what determines your net profit. How? Well, if you're spending money to fulfill a job and the money left over on that job is the margin, then your overhead costs are going to be taken away from that margin. So translation, you need high gross margins to work against any overhead costs so you have money left over at the end of the year in the bank, okay? Now, let's look at why or what the number 1 reason is that hardscapers are losing money. It is frankly because they do not know their numbers. It is a lack of knowing their numbers, okay? That is what leads to you generating poor quotes, okay? And poor quotes look like one of 2 things, okay? Very quickly, if you think that, because we're starting to talk numbers now, okay? If you think this stuff is very boring or it is very dry, heads up, that's probably one indicator as to why you're not doing well, because you think that you don't have to look at the numbers. If you own a business, if you are in charge of the business, the sales, the operations, everybody needs to know the numbers, okay? If you don't know your numbers, you cannot manage what you do not measure. So you need to measure absolutely every single thing. What we do at Restless Systems is we build growth, fulfillment, and innovation engines that track every number and find where you are doing well, where you are not doing well, and then we come up with ways to do better, okay? That's what we do at Restless Systems, but again, you don't need us for this, okay? This is what you're going to look at. But keep in mind, Whether you're with us or not, data is your daddy. It is your guiding light. It is your path. It is your North Star. You need to learn to love it. Here's what happens when you don't know your numbers, okay? When you don't know your numbers, you are going to calculate incorrect or inaccurate costs, which means you don't know how much it costs to fulfill a job. Because you have inaccurate costs, your markups are inaccurate. Because your markups are inaccurate, your margins are inaccurate. Because your margins are inaccurate, you are either A, losing money on sales that you're closing, or B, you're not closing because your margins are way out of whack, okay? Let's look at what that means. What I have circled here is the pre-construction portion. This is before you're building, and this is how you're calculating your numbers. So what happens is you get on site and you have like an on-site estimate inspection process. You then establish the scope of work. That is going to be whatever it is you're working with the homeowner on building, right? They want you to do like a pool for the pool guys, deck for the deck guys, backyard renovation for the outdoor living guys, maybe a concrete driveway or a paver patio or a retainer wall, right? That is like the thing. The scope of work refers to the thing that you're going to be doing. You are going to determine the cost of the thing, the cost of the project. You're going to determine how long it's going to take, all of your measurements, what's your production rate, how much does it cost to pay each guy, how much is the material going to cost, what's my potential waste, what are all my numbers. You're going to determine all of your costs on everything. Do I need to rent equipment? Do I need to sub anything out, right? You are then going to mark up those line items to make sure that you are creating margin. So if something costs you $1,000 with 15% waste, you're going to take that number and you're going to multiply it times 2 or 1.5 or 3 to get your markup and to establish margin. This is the money you will walk away with. You are then going to present that quote to the homeowner. Now there's 3 scenarios that come from this, okay? Scenario 1, if your projected margin is accurate, then you know that you can confidently close a job knowing you will not lose money. Let me explain. If you say, I'm expecting 40%, and you're working within that ballpark of I'm aiming 40%, but I will take no less than 35%. You know that below 35%, you will not take that job because you will lose money. You also know that your 35 to 40% is accurate, so you're not way overestimating and actually coming in way too high compared to the market. So you are in the sweet spot. It is like if you play 2K or any kind of sports video game, you're in the green, okay? You are in the green. You're not in the yellow, you're not in the red, which means you are most likely going to achieve the thing that you were trying to do, which is close at a healthy margin. Now, if you don't know your numbers, if you're just ballparking, you're just spitting out numbers, or your margins are too low, here's what's going to happen. If your margins are too low, you will most likely end up closing the job. Yes, congrats, you closed the job. However, you only close a job because you are the cheaper option, which means most likely you will either make very little money, if any, or you will lose money if something goes sideways. For example, think back to a time, maybe this has happened to you, maybe it hasn't, or maybe you know someone who this has happened to, where you estimated a job, you thought it was going to be, let's say, $1,500 for the cost. You did not estimate accurately. It ended up being a little bit more money. So what happened is you either A, go to the homeowner and say, hey, I need more money for this job, in which case they either say or think, this guy does not know what he's doing, or wow, what a fraud, what a scam. They always, blue collar guys always try to do this, right? That's how you get the bad flag, right? Oh, wow, you guys are always trying to ask for more money. So that doesn't look good. Or the other scenario is, oh, I don't want to tell him I need more, so I'm just going to eat the cost myself, and then you walk away losing money, right? That is how people end up working themselves into bankruptcy. The margin is too low to where they're not profiting, or they are losing money because they are not quoting properly. Now, you may have heard what I just said and thought to yourself, wow, that is what happened to me. Let me overcorrect and let me charge way more. Hang on. If your margin accuracy is too high, if you are too high, then you end up wondering why no one's hiring you. You're like, well, hang on, Alex said charge more. So now you're charging more, right? The guys at Rest of the System said charge more, so I'm charging more. But then you're sitting there wondering, oh, why is nobody working with me? Nobody's working with you because you are way above the market. So what ends up happening is you're scaring away about 80, 90% of the market, and you're only working with referrals. That's great though, right? Because referrals are so much fun to work with, right? Here's the deal with referrals. Number one, I love referrals. Why? Because they usually will pay your rate, and they're usually really easy to close, and they're usually really fun to work with. However, I want you to have as many referrals as possible. The only way that you're going to get more referrals is by closing more people. And to close more people, you need to have your numbers within the ballpark of what is acceptable for the market, okay? So if, for example, you slightly lowered your margin. We had a guy come to us, for example, one time, and he was at like 62% or 60% margin. And we're like, you are way above your market. That's why you're not closing anybody. We walked him down to about 45%. Boom. Next thing you know, close, 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 close. At first, he's upset because he's thinking, well, hang on, 45% is below 60. Yeah, but 60% margin at zero is horrible. I would rather you get 45% at closing 3 to 5 deals a month and then ramp those numbers up, because now we can reinvest that cash into getting a team, systems, marketing, everything you need to grow, even more equipment, right? Or even just paying yourselves, right? So you want to be in that sweet spot, not too high, not too low. That is where you get right here in the green, okay? Now, if you're the kind of guy who goes, I never lower my rates and I only work with referrals, that's great. This video is not for you, because you are either going to be very lucky. Like we know a guy in, I think it's like Nebraska or Kansas, and he's doing like 8 figures off referrals only. Great. I'm very happy for you. This video is not for you. Most of the people who are referrals only are usually only closing at most 3 to 8 jobs a month. Again, if that's your thing, that's fine. What I'm talking about in this video are the guys who are trying to make as high margins as they can at as high revenue as they can. That's who this video is for, okay? So how do we fix this situation? What we do is we're going to use the Job Cost Analysis Engine, the JCAE, just a little acronym. This is the engine that's going to help you correct this behavior to make sure that you are profitable. What's happening is that when you go on site, remember this piece right here, when you go on site, this is your pre-construction. So you're estimating what you believe those numbers are. That's why a lot of people call it an estimate, on-site estimate. What we need to do is we need to equally prioritize. We need to focus on the post. After the job is done, we need to make sure that the numbers went the way we expected. That is the main goal. Now, you've probably heard this before, right? They say revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. But how do you get higher profits? Net profit is the war. That's the year goal that you're trying to hit. It is the war. But the war is won at the gross profit level. Gross profit is the battle where the war is won. So what you're going to do is when a project is finished, whether it's a hardscape, whether it's outdoor living, whether it's landscape, whether it's remodeling, whether it's a residential construction, any custom project work, okay, you're going to wait a few days and you're going to make sure you spent everything, got all your money in, and you're going to conduct a job cost analysis. What you're going to do is you're going to calculate your actual labor, your actual material, your actual equipment costs. What did you actually spend? Not what you expected, what you actually spent. And then you're going to compare your actual costs compared to your projected costs. And we're going to figure out, were you accurate? Was your projection, was your estimate accurate to what actually happened? If yes, if your actual costs were within 3% of projected. So for example, you're saying I expected to be at 40% margin. I'm within 37, 40 minus 3, to 43, 40 plus 3, give or take 3. If you're within 3% of what you projected, congratulations, you are very, very good. You want to record your margins, and what you want to do to challenge yourself is you want to get that number as close to zero as possible, because you don't want to lose money that you don't need to lose. So you want to get that as close as possible. If you can raise your rates a little bit or change your positioning to close at a little bit higher percent, boom, you are doing very, very well. You can almost exactly project what numbers you will do every single year financially. However, if you are not within 3%, you want to figure out what caused the margin differential. Was it error or was it waste? What is the difference? Waste is going to refer to you had a plan, but it was not followed properly. So we wasted something on the job site. We wasted time. We wasted material. We didn't coordinate properly. We got the equipment rental too early. We rented it for too long. We rented it for too short and had to pay a fee. Whatever it is, we wasted something. What you want to do in that situation is you want to determine what went wrong on the job site so that you can reduce your waste, reduce your wasted material, reduce your wasted labor, time, etc. Anything. You just want to reduce waste. If you know anything like Six Sigma, this is like a big manufacturing thing. They refer to it as muda, right? It's the Japanese word for waste. The whole goal is if you can reduce as much waste as possible, you will be extremely efficient, right? So you want to reduce waste, okay? However, if the plan was followed and there was still more than a 3% deviance, you want to reestablish how you are calculating your costs so you can get closer to what you expected or what you projected. Where are you calculating costs before? So now you're gonna look back and be like, oh, when we measure this, or when we have this type of project, or when we have this kind of weather conditions, we thought it was A, it's actually B. So you wanna get better at projecting by looking at what actually happened when you projected. A great analogy I use here all the time is if you have kids, right? If you have kids and you're planning a trip to Disney, you're like, we're gonna wake up at 7 a.m. and we're gonna get in the car at 7:15 and we're gonna get to breakfast at 8 a.m. That's your plan. Does that ever happen? No. So what you need to do to be smart is you need to adjust what actually happened. And you need to say, okay, based on what I know about my family, based on what I know about what's going on, based on what I know about children and getting your wife out of the home on time, I know I need the plan to look more like this. So now if I can actually hit those plans because I know what I'm dealing with, the day is going to go a lot smoother. Same thing for projects, okay? Now, if you are able to get within your margins very good, let's say you project 40 and you hit 40, now that you know your numbers, what could we do with those numbers so that we can actually close more deals? How could we close more deals without even you being present or the sales manager being present, right? Because the idea is that if you are stuck as the main seller, then the company cannot grow without you being present. So what do? Here's what we're going to do. Once you can establish how you determine your cost, the next piece is determining your margin, your markup. Markup is relative to the cost. Margin is relative to the project, okay? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to calculate a price ceiling and a price floor, okay? The ceiling is a goal number. That is the number that you would love to close out. This is like your opening number. If you know any sales training, this refers to your price anchor. Your floor is the lowest number you will accept. Anybody telling me I will never lower my cost, in my opinion, is leaving millions on the table every single year. And you might as well go ahead and buy a red nose and oversized shoes to go with that clown behavior, okay? I'll give you an example. I had a guy come to me and he goes, if I price $20,000 to $20,000, I go, really? You wouldn't accept $19,999.99? And he goes, no, it's the principal. Great, I can't help you. That's fine. I can't help you. What our clients do is we have a ceiling and a floor. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to do a 50% ceiling, that's like your dream, and a 33% floor. What you do is once you calculate your cost, now you, your whole team, anybody can do this now who understands how to determine the cost. And you're going to say, I'm going to take my cost times 2. That gives me 50% margin. I'm also going to take my cost and do times 1.5, 1.75, whatever you want to do. But 2 numbers, a ceiling and a floor. What does that mean? I'm going to start the sales conversation at a 2x multiplier, and I'm going to make sure that I can close anything. I now have full permission to close anything within that 33% margin. And again, based on your company, you might say, well, 35, 37, 38. The guys that we work with that were doing 6.5 million, what we did was a ceiling was 42. We closed at no less than 37%. And then for turf, we had different numbers, but just for most design and build, it was 42 to 37%. Why? Because now the sales team is empowered to close at that number without having to run it through you. They can go as low as 37%, as low as 33%, as low as whatever you decide is your floor without having to run it by you, which means you can close more jobs, close them faster, close them before the competition comes around the corner. And you can, again, like I said, you can shift these numbers up or down based on how aggressively you want your team to close, as long as you are communicating those windows to your team. So what we do is we'll do like a hybrid close where like an on-site sales guy will go give a number. If they don't close, then a remote salesperson can follow up and they know the window established by the on-site salesperson. So they have full permission to close within that window. When we do this, our guys are closing between 40 and 60% of all qualified leads. And when you have the power to close at a healthy margin, you now have more funds to reinvest into growth. You have more funds to reinvest into equipment and system. You have more funds to then counter your indirect or overhead costs so you can come out more profitable. This is all we are doing. Now, once you identify your ceiling and floor and you're seeing where you're closing at, the name of the game becomes how can I close at a higher rate? That's going to be referred to in trainings on positioning, on sales, on objection handling, on pre-nurture sequences, all videos we have coming or we already have out. But right here, if you know your numbers where you're closing, you will know what you can accept and you will know what you cannot accept. And so when you implement this, you are now able to empower your sales team to make decisions on pricing in order to close more jobs without selling yourself into bankruptcy or having to be involved in every situation because they keep tugging on your shirt saying, oh, hey, we need you over here. Oh, hey, we need you over here. Oh, hey, we need you over here. This is what systems do. They empower your team to operate without you, without putting you in a bad position. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions at all, let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.